Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Well, hello again. Let me tell you about this fascinating young woman that's going to be my guest today, Dr. Fahmi Farah. Isn't that fun? I love to say it, Dr. Fahmi Farah. Did I say it correctly?
You did.
Dr. Farah has so many things to share with you today, not only about her practice, but about her talents and gifts, what's going on with COVID. We're even going to be talking about masks. She brought some. We're going to learn how to select the right ones. It's awesome. But let me share her credentials. She's very accomplished and trained as an invasive cardiologist and specializes in all kinds of heart conditions as well as nuclear cardiology, echocardiology, cardiography, I should say, and women's heart disease. She has her own institution. I don't know that I'd want to come to an institution. Institute, call it whatever you want. It's her area, her own practice, where it's called Texas Bentley Heart. I'm going to tell you in a minute why it's called Texas Bentley Heart. And so the other thing up front to mention is, this is all about her credentials now. She is the founder, actually, of the founding director of the Global Health Alliance. So much to talk about today. Welcome on my show.
Thank you, Valerie. It's a pleasure to be here. It's such an honor to be on your show. So thank you for having me.
And it's an honor to have you. You know, when we talked on the phone and I was doing the pre-interview, you shared with me so many fascinating things that I don't think any doctor I've ever talked with has the amount of gifts and talents, never mind what you're doing as a fantastic doctor. And I want to talk about some of those things. Such a multifaceted background. And I think I just want to start with, how did you become a doctor? Everyone wants to know, did you always want to be a doctor? Did you?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact. I come from a family of heart disease. You know, it runs pretty wild in my family. A lot of people have died prematurely as early as their 40s. And so I grew up seeing that. I grew up, a large part of my life was, going in and out of hospitals and stuff. So that interest of, looking up to a doctor and the hope they bring in the most vulnerable time of a person's life, that's what inspired me to, hopefully someday become a doctor. So I had that desire to be a physician from a very early on. And I was in elementary school, as a matter of fact. And then so I, took every step in that direction. So it was a very tough, long journey. No part of it was easy. It took a lot of hard work, dedication, hearing a lot of no's, a lot of roadblocks, but you just have to work right through them. And so here I am.
What was the hardest part? I've always wondered, and I've talked with many doctors about their journey, but as a woman, was it more difficult?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I would like to think so. I know things are improving, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, things are headed in the right direction. But when I was applying for medical school, like the statistics will tell you, it was not even. We were not on the even ground. So yeah, that part did have its own challenges, just being a female.
Why was it not even? What do you mean by that?
Well, the statistics will show you that, it was not a 50-50, male versus female in any classroom, in any medical school classroom. Okay. But even after medical school, I went through medical school for 4 years. It's very difficult, actually, to get accepted to medical school. There's a lot you have to do. Your GPA, you have to be, top of your class. You have to make sure your GPA is, very good. It has to be close to 4.0 for you to be competitive. And there's something called the Mcat. It is the admissions examination for medical school. That was like a monster, like that's how difficult that test was, at least for me, took months and months of preparation. And during my time, the test was, I believe it was almost 10 hours in one sitting. Like, you did get like small breaks in between, but it was not just an examination of, your knowledge, but it was also an examination of endurance. I remember preparing for the Mcat. It was such an ordeal. Even though it's almost a 10-hour long exam, you're fighting against the clock because you're timed. So, you have to prepare in a certain way for the knowledge part of it. But I remember preparing also as if it was a marathon. I changed my diet. I was eating certain things during the daytime, certain things in the afternoon, especially when I was doing my practice exams. I would start out with like high protein diet, no carb, just because I didn't want that crash in the middle. And then, eat a little bit more, lots of bananas for the potassium and the energy. And at the end, for the last section, the last part of the exam, I would just give everything, that I love, like chocolate,
really?
All of that, just to get that boost of energy to get through the last part of it. So it's fun to think about those moments, because it really was like a sport almost. It was like a marathon preparing for that exam. So then you have to get over the hurdle of, getting a solid, competitive score on the Mcat. And then there's a lot of other things. You have to find, you have to do volunteer work. You have to shadow a doctor if you have the opportunity to do so, because that would set you apart from the other applicants. That's where one of my challenges came, actually, because I came from a family of patients, but I didn't have any exposure to healthcare, physicians. So to find a doctor, in order for you to be able to shadow, you have to know somebody, like an actual doctor, who would allow you to go and do that with them. And I didn't have that contact. And I remember, I was young. I was a college student at that time. I was just so disheartened that I didn't have that exposure to a physician.
Even the physicians that helped your family?
Right. No, I did not have that, because, it's very formal, like that patient and physician relationship. It wasn't that kind of relationship where I can just, no. So ultimately, after months of trying, I was able to get my shadowing experience with someone, and I'm very grateful to them for that. But the challenge was real for me, not having that mentorship, how to get into medical school. And I think it's so important, mentorship for young generations, young people who are trying to become physicians, do good for the community. Sometimes they just need direction. And that direction it can make your life so much smoother and easier, something I didn't have. So finally made it to medical school. And, in medical school, I had a great experience. I didn't feel any gender difference in medical school. I have to be honest,
Where was medical school?
I went to Texas Tech School of Medicine, Health Sciences Center. It was in Lubbock, Texas. And I had great set of friends. I had a lot of great mentors in Texas Tech, and I think that made a big difference for me. And the mentor that I will mention, he's very important to me, is the dean of the School of Medicine, Dr. Stephen Burke. He was a great supporter. I've learned so much from him. I actually got to work with him very closely, because in medical school is really when my leadership skills flourished.
I'll bet.
I had the opportunity to become the president of an organization called Student National Medical Association. I was the president for 2 years, the second and third years of my medical school. And during that time, I was really able to focus on things that were important to me. So I used that platform to do certain things. For instance, what I experienced trying to get accepted to medical school and not having that mentorship, what it meant to me. So through this organization, I established, mentorship programs. I started it at both one at high school and one at the Texas Tech undergraduate campus.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so the goal was to help people, disadvantaged students at high school and graduate level to have that opportunity to talk to someone, to have that exposure so that they can guide them, hey, do this, do that, don't do that. So that was nice. I'm really big on public health. So I established an annual health fair for the community in Lubbock, Texas. That was one of the first ones, actually, that was that large, where we provided the opportunity for the community people for that one day to come in and get essential screenings done, so they could screen their, blood pressure, for diabetes. We had an array of specialties available in different booths. So we had cardiology, we had primary care physicians, OB-GYN, we had ophthalmology. So we were actually giving free eye exams to some of the patients' cholesterol screening. So it was very helpful. We got really excellent feedback from the community, and to engage the community. If we want to have, health is such an important part of every community for advancement. And the only way to do that really is by incorporating your community. And it was just a great way of doing that.
My goodness. And it's ongoing, I'm sure.
It's ongoing, yes. Mm-hmm.
So all those leadership attributes, what I love about you is that you've got the social aspect, and then you've got the intellectual aspect over here. And now I want to talk about the talent aspect.
Oh, sure.
This is so fun. I can't wait to tell the audience about this. So you shared with me that at a very early age, you found out that you could sing beautifully and you're an incredible artist. All right. At what age and how did all that happen? I think that's
sure. Well, thank you for asking that question. I don't get asked that question very many times. I usually talk about health. So yeah, art came to me I was very little at that time. It was in elementary school. I remember it was art class. So we were all heading to our art class. And this was the first day when our art teacher was going to teach us how to paint. So when we arrived to the classroom, we had, watercolor paint, a piece of paper, just white basic piece of paper, sure. and a brush, one brush. And we had some shapes, like triangles, circle, rectangular shapes. Very basic. So our teacher, when we arrived, just told us, okay, you have some shapes, you have these colors, just choose your shape and paint. And she only gave us 3 colors. It was blue, yellow, and red, the 3 primary colors, yes. And she gave us 2 shades, the black and white. So altogether we had 5. And so she told us, you can make any color you want, just paint your shape. That's your task for today.
And you're how old now?
So I was 9.
9.
Yeah, okay. I was 9. And so I'm like, here we start. So all my friends, they all started with their shapes. And I was just so fascinated by the fact that you could make any color you want to out of these 3 colors. So I was just having the time of my life, figuring out how to, I spent
mixing it all.
Yeah, mixing it. So I created every color. I'm like, this is so much fun. So then I just got lost in it and I painted. So I shared that painting with you. It's my first painting ever, actually. So I completely forgot about the shape part by the end of the class. And it came pretty quickly. I guess it was an hour-long class. And so my teacher said, all right, we're done for today. Everybody hold up what you painted. I want to see your shape. So everybody held up their papers. And I was so nervous. I didn't want to hold up mine, so I didn't. I was just like, I don't want to hold up mine because I didn't do a shape.
You were out of the shapes.
I was out of shapes. So I was so afraid because I thought I was going to get into a lot of trouble because I completely did not follow any direction, you know? So then she's like, no, hold it up. So I held up my, work. And she just like didn't say anything. She was just like silently staring at it. And it just like terrified me because I was like, wow, I don't know what's going to happen. Because I was someone who never got in trouble. I put in a lot of efforts into not getting into trouble. And all these thoughts were just going through my head like, oh my God, they're probably going to call my parents. My mom's going to ask me why I did this. Like all these thoughts, But to my surprise, she was very kind. And she really liked what I did. And she actually let me do what I wanted to for the rest of the year in that class.
She saw your gift.
So she told me, you don't have to do anything that we're doing, just paint. So she just let me paint for the rest of the year. And she was so kind that she actually provided me with the supplies. So she told me, like, here's canvas if you want to do canvas. So basically she was upgrading me from piece of paper to canvas. So then that's when I started painting on canvas. She provided me with acrylic and oil paint. So the rest of my paintings were all oil and acrylic.
And you paint today?
I do, yes.
And do you paint, Fahmi, for just stress release or joy, or when do you take the paints out?
Yes. So now, and for all of my life, it's been a hobby. It's something I really enjoy, painting. So it's been more for a getaway.
Yeah.
It's been a really, really awesome stress relief for me because when I, create my own colors, I'm in my own little world and I'm just away from everything, so it's the biggest peaceful. Yes, it's very peaceful for me. And I wanted to let you know, the first painting I ever did, well, actually before even that, so I've always wanted to be a doctor, even before I started painting. So even before I was 9 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. But after that painting started, I started to get a lot of encouragement from not just my teacher, but the entire school that I needed to go into art. So I actually, in New York, I grew up in New York. So going from elementary to middle school, and then when you're moving on from middle school to high school, it's very much like a college application process if you want to go to a good school. So you have to actually apply and get accepted. So my teacher really wanted me to apply to an art school. It was one of the really good art schools in New York. And so I applied, and they had a pretty rigorous set of, requirements. So they require you to put together a portfolio, and they have certain things they want in that portfolio. It took me a year to create that portfolio. So I created it with the help of my art teacher. And then you submit that portfolio, and then if they like it, they call you for an interview. So I actually got the interview, and I remember the day of the interview was so. Every time I go back, it was snowing. It snowed a lot in New York. It was winter, and I remember I was little. I was small at that time.
You're still small.
I'm still small. I guess I didn't grow that much. But yeah, my mom was pregnant with my little brother at that time. And so it was my mom and one of her friends who were taking me to this interview. So I remember walking through that snow, and it was brutal, the cold. It was just blowing me away almost, because my portfolio was the size of me. It was like this giant black thing that I was carrying. And every time the wind blew, I was going with it, that's how we arrived at the interview.
Those memories,
yes. So I didn't know what to expect when I arrived at the interview, but it was an all-day long interview. They had different stations with actual real-life models. So they had all these models on top of tables, and you go from station to station, and they time you, and you have to paint or draw or sketch, whatever, And And you do that all day for the entire day. And then at the end of it, they have an actual in person, like a person sitting in front of you and interviewing you, like talking to you and going through your personal portfolio that you created. So all that day was over, and then I actually got accepted. To my surprise, I actually got accepted.
Surprised at all.
And then that was, towards the end of 8th grade. And, I was little, I was excited. So I'm like, yeah, I want to go. I want to go into art school. And everybody was encouraging me at school. But then that's the time when my family moved from New York to Texas. So, that obviously didn't happen. I didn't end up going to art school. And I don't know that I would have, even if I stayed in New York, because, I even at
still wanted to be
even
a
as a
doctor.
kid, I was at that dichotomy, like, I do want to be a doctor. So I ended up, making that a hobby rather than a professional thing. But I want to let you know, my first painting that I did, the very first one with that incident, in my art class, that painting is very special, and it went to a very special place. So in medical school, going back to medical school, I started, one of the tasks I was given as the president was to increase diversity, medical school, classroom diversity. So the way I solved that problem was, diversifying is by creating scholarship, basically, to help disadvantaged students, to help them and to attract them to come to the School of Medicine. And so the way I did it is by organizing a fundraising gala. And it was a multicultural fundraising gala. So there's a story there. So when I first introduced the idea of having this gala, nobody was on board. I got a lot of pushback from, the other officers, a lot of friends. They had all good intentions for me. They were not giving me pushback.
They were discouraging you.
They were discouraging me, but with good intentions, because, I was a medical student, and they were concerned, like, how much time it was going to take up. Like, medical school is a very rigorous place. You're studying day and night. Like, when will I find the time to do this? So they were looking out for me. They were discouraging, but they were looking out for me. But there was one person who believed in me, and that was Dr. Burke, the dean of the School of Medicine. Yeah, so he was just like at that same table as the others were saying, we don't know about that. He was like, wait a minute, tell me more. So there it started, so I got a lot of support from him. And so we did the gala the very first year I was the president, and it was an enormous success. It was instantly one of the largest fundraising events in Lubbock, Texas. It was the second largest during its first, the inaugural year. We raised over $50,000 that first year. So when we raised that money, then the question came, now how do we divide, is it all going to go to scholarship? And of course, yes, that was the purpose for it. But I decided at that time, with the help of Dr. Burke, to actually split that money in half, to make half of it go instantly to scholarship for the incoming students that are coming in. But the other half, I decided to create an endowment.
Smart.
An endowment. So the idea behind that was that down the road, when I'm no longer here, for some reason, if this banquet stops, this scholarship will stop too, and we didn't want that. So we wanted to generate basically a self-creating scholarship down the road, many years later, even if this banquet is not to be there. So for the last several years, all the money, half of it kept going into the endowment. And so now the endowment is actually generating its own scholarship. We've given out many scholarships to students through this. And the banquet, the good thing is the banquet is still ongoing. It is very successful. It has, what I've been told, it has been able to earn more than $1 million since its inauguration. And where I was going with this, with the painting, is that my very first painting, sold at the auction at this event, at this gala. and it went towards scholarship for a disadvantaged
How much
student.
did you get for your painting?
It was not much. It was only a few $100s. But hey, it was.
Oh, that's heartwarming. So that went to a really good cause.
It went to a good cause.
All these good causes. You've been doing incredible things. You talked about being a mentor, and the power of that. In terms of just things that you've learned in your own life. One of the things that I think is important to talk about is what you've learned now with COVID. And tell us from your perspective, and then we're going to see masks too. Tell us about what it was like when it first started, and how did you pivot to put together whatever disciplines you had to. We now know if we go into doctors' offices today or telemedicine, but we now know and we see all the disciplines that are in place.
Yes.
How did that happen for you? How did you do that?
Yeah, it was a very challenging task, to say the least.
Did you have time? Did they say next week? This is what you?
No, it was actually instant. It was overnight for us.
It was overnight.
It was overnight for us.
Okay.
So, the whole thing was just so challenging, and it came so quickly. We went from, it's not here in the U.S. yet, to, oh my goodness, it's everywhere.
We've got it.
So traditionally, the way, I have my own cardiovascular clinic, and traditionally in a clinic, what happens is we see patients in the clinic. Telemedicine was out there, but it was definitely not so prominent. So majority of the patients in my clinic, 100% of the patients were being seen the traditional way prior to COVID, in-house, in clinic,
Sure.
very routine. Now we went from that, the traditionally seeing patient in the clinic, to overnight switching to telemedicine, where we were having to give access to patients from their home. And it was an enormous task.
All the technology
we had to, but my staff and my team did a fantastic job. We were successful. We said, okay, starting tomorrow, we're going telehealth, and the next day we went telehealth. So I have to give a lot of credit to my wonderful staff. They did a phenomenal job of implementing that. There was a certain amount of security that we had to implement. So as a team, we really came together. I have to give a lot of credit to our patients as well, because, in cardiology, a lot of our patients are not so, they're not very familiar with technology, like modern technology. And I don't say that I don't say that in a negative way, because I myself I'm not very technologically advanced. I'm a cardiologist, I'm not a tech person. But yeah, so there was that challenge for all of us to get on board with technology, which patients actually initially, we took a lot of that burden, because we had to coach our patients how to do it from their end. So I actually dedicated a staff to do just that.
Okay, that's smart.
Yeah, because I didn't want, because a lot of the patients, they were a little bit panicked when we first told them that, excuse me, you don't have to come to the clinic. We're going to come to you through media. Yeah. So they were like, whoa, I don't know how to do that.
Just show up.
Yes. So we basically told them, you don't have to do anything. We will handle all of it. So I dedicated a staff who would call them, walk them through step by step, the process. Yeah. And we just told them, you don't have to do anything. We do everything, which made it really a lot simpler for the patient population. And now they love it, the patients.
Sure.
Because, telehealth is such an amazing tool. I don't think it should ever go away. It is an eye-opener as a physician, what it does, what it's capable of doing to the community. As far as access to medicine goes,
it is.
Yes, we are reaching people miles away,
Sure.
far away. We are, there are certain groups of people. Mobility is such an issue, they're on wheelchair. They have to arrange for rides because they're dependent on a ride. So it takes up not just, a lot of effort, not just from the patient standpoint, but their caretaker. They have to take that day off. This made it a lot better.
And it is going to stay. I'm amazed at, I had to do a telemedicine. I broke my foot, and the doctor said, well, show up, and I did. I'm good on technology, thank goodness. But it was hilarious. He said, show me your foot. And I said, show my foot? He said, yeah. And so I had to literally take my foot up and hold it in front of the camera to show him that the swelling was getting better. And he said, good, I don't need to see you for a while. You're good. I want to talk about these masks. So would you show us for the audience and talk to us for those who are listening on podcast? I want to see the different masks that you've brought. And my daughter gave me this one. It's cotton, and it has stars on it, and it's cute. I walk around, they go, oh, I like your mask. But I have no idea if this is a good mask or not. So tell us in just a brief amount of time that we have left, what are the different ones? What should we look for? What's good, what's bad?
Sure. So I'm going to start with your mask, actually, because that's what majority of the community is wearing.
I'll just hold it.
It's a cloth mask. It is perfectly all right to wear a cloth mask. So what we recommend in a cloth mask is 3 layers. 3 layers of cloth, and majority of the makers, the mask makers, cloth mask makers, they're doing that right now. They're using 3 layers. And as far as cloth mask goes, you should wash it every day. And the other thing is...
Wash it how? In the washing machine? Or
you can wash it in the washing machine, or even just by hand, just soap and water in your sink. You can just wash it. That's one good thing about this virus, is that it's very susceptible to soap, so if you just wash it, it really kills the virus. The other thing with the cloth masks, some of them
cute
come
masks.
with, they're cute so
masks.
You can actually encourage kids are more likely to wear them. I've seen some masks with like superheroes and action figures, so hopefully that'll make it easier for kids to wear it. But one thing I wanted to mention about the cloth mask is some of them come with a slit for like filters, so it's a really good idea to use a filter, because that's something you can change out every day. So that's cloth mask.
What about the basic?
Yes. So that brings me to the, medical grade masks. So what I have here, I brought my own masks. So here, this is a surgical mask, and this has, these things, and it has a wire that pinches on the nose so that it makes it more, airtight. So this is something that I wear in the hospital. And
can we get these?
I know there was a shortage of masks earlier, but now I think they're doing better. So I think you can get them in Amazon and online. So yes, you should be able to get these. I'm seeing a lot of my patients and people in the community wearing these. So these are good. These are something that, ideally you should wear it one time or one day, but with shortage and stuff, we're having to be creative with that.
And for those who are listening only, it has a gray strip across the top, and then it's just white.
Yes, but these masks come in many different forms. Like they come in different colors, so it doesn't have to have the gray on top of it.
Just as long as
it has that pinch capacity.
Okay.
And then I'm going to advance to another type of surgical mask. This is another surgical mask. It has the same protection capability as the other one I showed you, except it has these strings. We actually wear these.
That's like apron strings.
Yes. I actually wear these are the masks I wear during my procedures, my invasive procedures and surgeries. So the good thing about these also have the pinch, the wire.
Wire pinch.
And the good thing about these is that during surgery, we prefer these because it actually makes it more airtight from here, so that if you're wearing glasses and stuff, it fogs up, right? It causes your glasses to fog. This prevents that. This actually causes the fogging to be less.
And it says HALYARD.
Halard. Yeah, but
Halard.
These come in many different brands, many different forms. This is just a generic, surgical mask. And then we have a lot of people are wearing what's called KN95. KN95, so this is a KN95. This is something that is available online. So this is not N95. I just want to make that clarification. It does give you a lot of coverage and a lot of protection.
It looks like a triangle.
Yes, and it has a pincher as well. It does more coverage. It's more airtight than your regular surgical mask that I just showed you. But I don't believe that this is still as good as an actual N95.
N95, all right.
Yes.
What is that?
So then we go to N95. This is an N95 mask.
That looks so small. It's
sized.
Turquoise on the outside. Is there a name for how?
No, this is just N95.
Just N95, okay.
And you're right. It is small because it's shaped for me, for my face.
Well, there you go.
So it comes in different shapes, sizes. So for N95, for it to be effective, you need to be sized. So you need to be fitted for it. My size is small, but it has two strings that like one goes in the back of the head and one goes on top to really make it airtight. And the purpose of N95 is it doesn't allow anything to come in. So it makes it pretty airtight. And this is what we're using currently when we're seeing COVID positive patients in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
So this is reserved. This is very special. We're not using it every day or like, all the time. We're using it at this time to see patients, COVID positive patients. I want to say one more thing about N95 masks. There are a lot of people who are wearing N95 masks that have valves, or any mask that has
I've seen those.
Valves, yes. So there's been a recent, advisory put out about them by the CDC. So the valves are one-way valves on most of these masks. So what that means is that the person who's wearing the mask is protecting them because it's a one-way valve, so the air they're breathing in is filtered. However, the air they're breathing out is not filtered. So while they're protecting themselves, the person who's in front of them is not protected. To them, it's as if they're not wearing a mask. So that's why we're asking a lot of our healthcare professionals to avoid wearing N95 masks with valves because it's not protecting the person in front of them.
Thank you for that. That's fascinating, at least to know all the different kinds, and now we have some idea of what to order. And the main thing is we all know to wear masks. We must if we're going to be in it to win it. You, in closing, I wanted to just share a couple of things that we identified were important to you. I call them teachable points of view, but things you've learned. So if I can just read them, and if there's something that hits you, I'd like for you to tell us. Well, one was, don't let others persuade you can't do something. Well, we heard about that. Don't let anybody tell you can't. When someone tells me that, I do everything I can. Absolutely.
Yes.
You said with every success, there's hard work. We know that. It's interesting. People think that even this, she just shows up and interviews someone. Oh my goodness. No, there's a whole lot more to it than that.
Yes.
Define yourself first before anyone else knows you. And that's why you're here, doctor, because you are totally authentic. You're just real. You call your patients your partners. And that's the kind of doctor I want to go to. God forbid if I ever have any heart problems, you will get a call. And then finally, you said adversity is your friend, and thank you for that. You've talked about the challenges you've had, and you always rose to the occasion. So just one thing I did say that I would tell you, audience, is the name of her institution, which is called the Texas Bentley Heart, and Bentley was her little precious teddy bear dog. I've never heard of that breed. Look it up. I'm going to bring your curiosity in. It's called teddy bear breed. The dog is a little tiny dog, and it's really like a what? Bichon?
It's a Shih Tzu and Bichon mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
And precious. Those of us who love dogs, when they pass, it's very special. So she named the institute for that. I just thank you so much for being on the show, and we are going to put on the show at the bottom how people can reach you, and it's really easy. It's her name at gmail.com, and you can look at that. and look at it for later. Should you need a wonderful doctor who's not only a wonderful doctor, but a very caring person who is doing global work with this Global Health Alliance. And again, on the screen, should you want to know more about that, do check it out. They're doing things very differently globally for all of health and aspects around that. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me today, Valerie.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me. It was such an honor to be here today, to be able to talk to you and about some of the things I feel very passionate about. So I thank you for letting me come to your show. It was a pleasure.
You honored us. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, so here's my Valerieism for today. You can only do what you do if you know who you are. Now that comes from the depth of my toes, because so much of my work is around your brand, the who you are. I don't care about what you do or how you do it as much as I care about who you are, because people buy you first. Then they buy what you do, and then they buy the organization that you're a part of. Did you know that? First, you have to make that relationship. And if you don't have that sense deep of where you're coming from, then nothing is going to flow through you. I had a wonderful interview that was DeWitt Jones, and you can see that interview. DeWitt said something so powerful. He just said, until you know who you are, basically know who you are, and let things then flow through you. That was what I remember. It was flow through you. And he said, Valerie, you might get discouraged in the work you're doing. We all get discouraged. But if you'll just remember, the good Lord is going to let things flow through you if you're authentic. And that's the whole show. So know your brand, the depth to your toes of who you are, and then you'll know why you're doing what you do, because you'll have a purpose to it. And that's my Valerieism for today.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.